Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie Johnson, and we don't have Dianne with us here today as she is actually on her annual ladies trip to New Mexico. So we will chat with her when she gets back next week. But we do have a very special guest joining us today. This will be her first time on our show, and we're super excited to have her. But before I introduce her, just a reminder, we are in the middle of September. I don't know how that happened so fast, but it's here. And in just a couple of weeks, we will be having our annual Beyond the Grave and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein this year. So super excited. Tickets are more than half sold out. So if you're planning to come, you're in the Colorado area, especially Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Southern Denver area, get those tickets now because they are almost gone. We reduced the number of tickets this year based on some feedback we got last year. We wanted to make each tour group a little bit smaller this year, just to make people more comfortable on the hayride portion of the tour. So there are fewer tickets. So if you don't get those tickets, you won't be able to attend. It is one of those events where you have to have your tickets ahead of time. We don't sell them at the gate. But again, this year we've chosen Frankenstein. Our actors are working really hard on putting together their portions of each story. I got to speak with one of them yesterday. Actually, he had a call because he had some questions about what he wanted to do with this character. So I am super thrilled. It's going to be so fabulous. The weather is supposed to be really good this year. So that will make the evening much more enjoyable, or the 2 evenings much more enjoyable, because it's not supposed to be super cold. It's not supposed to rain. And we should just be able to get through the cemetery on the hayride and have a great time. So again, make sure you get your tickets. The links are in the show notes, as well as directly on our website. And we will see you at this year's Beyond the Grave, October 4th and 5th. And now let me introduce today's guest. We will be exploring a cemetery in New York today. It's been a little while since we've done one out of New York. And the focus is Hillside Cemetery, which is in Middletown, New York. And our guest today is JoEllen Hundeland. And JoEllen wrote a book that she recently published all about Hillside Cemetery. And if you're looking at us on YouTube, I'm holding the book up now. It's a fabulous book. The photography is just supreme. And of course, JoEllen took all of these photos herself. So welcome to the show, JoEllen. We are super happy to have you.
Thank you.
So to start you off, what led you on a journey to write a book about a cemetery? And how did you get to where you were photographing this particular cemetery?
I always had an interest in cemeteries. Even as a little girl, I remember being on the school bus, and there was one cemetery we would pass every day that was overgrown. And my mind would always wander looking out the school bus window, wondering what's in the cemetery, who's buried in that cemetery. So I think from a young kid, and of course, I've always been a Halloween fan. So I think from a young kid, I just always had this instilled in me. I started out drawing and painting, and after my mom passed in 2007, I didn't pick up a paintbrush for a long time, but my husband bought me a camera. So out I went with my camera in hand, and somehow I wound up in Hillside Cemetery. And I had actually worked for a local grocery store when I got out of high school. That was in Middletown. And a lot of the old timers used to come into the store and tell old stories of their relatives. And so a lot of these names in the books were people, descendants of people in the cemetery. I knew them from coming into the store, and it was such an old time Middletown hub. And I learned so much. And I think that's where I actually got like the local cemetery bug. So the local history bug. So that's kind of where the book launched from, I think. And I wanted to write this book 20 years ago, and it just did not come to fruition. Things were different. The internet wasn't, I guess the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is now. Right. I had to rely more on local stores and things to carry the book. And, a lot of people aren't really interested, or, it's new blood coming into the area, and they don't really care so much about the history, so it was a little tougher. So I had all my notes and I had everything saved. And then I just continued to research cemeteries just for fun and take pictures. And someone reached out to me, the publisher reached out to me on my Instagram account. And he said, "Do you have a cemetery in mind?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." Not even a question. It had to be Hillside. I'm attached to Hillside. I feel like I know everybody in there that I've done the research on, you know. And my friend Cheryl and I, who I've been friends with her for, oh my gosh, over 30 years, I said, I'm writing a book. Would you like to come with me? I said, and we'll actually literally like treasure hunt for these graves. He's like, yeah. So we went down there multiple times to take pictures, look for graves, to kind of match the stories. There's a couple we couldn't find, unfortunately, but
which
yeah,
happens, in a lot of cases. They're just
it does. But I mean, the place, every time I go there, I feel like I find something new. It's just amazing. There's so much
it's
history attached to it. It's just amazing. I love going there.
yeah, it's I haven't been to this one. I just read
Mhm.
your book and looked at all your photos, plus the additional photos that you sent us. That JoEllen was so nice and sent us a bunch of extra photos that didn't make it into the book. So those you can see on our social media, that she was nice enough to share with us. But it's so magical looking. Now,
Oh, thank you.
tell us when this particular cemetery was founded, because you've got some graves that go way back. Um,
I
in New
believe
York.
1860 or 1861.
So right around the Civil War.
Yes.
Yes.
And there were a lot of graves that were actually moved from other locations,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because I can't even fathom that being done today. 1870, oh Lordy, 1870-ish. And I think 1882, there were two different groups of graves moved.
In the book, you said in 1882, you said a lot of them were relocated from Little Cemetery, which must be
Yes.
nearby.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
That was the second group, and then there was a group before that that included some Revolutionary War soldiers
I was
that
going to
were,
say, because you have some photos of their graves, which are, the
yes.
headstones are
And
older.
actually, and since I've taken those photos, the Hillside Cemetery Corporation has redone those stones.
Oh,
Like they
cool.
made them. Yeah. So, and I haven't been back to see that, but I thought, oh, sure, they've been that way for 150 years, and as soon as I take photos and they get published, now they're all different. But anyway, no, but it was a nice thing that they did.
They
So
just wanted to make sure that whoever read your book and then came to see the cemetery was like, oh, there's the Revolutionary War soldiers.
yes,
Here's those
yes,
people. Yeah,
yes,
I love
exactly,
that.
exactly.
Um,
But it's
so
it's neat that there's graves that predate the actual cemetery, that
yeah,
that had come from the churchyard. And like I said, I can't even fathom digging up bodies and just putting them,
it's
but
so when I very first started getting into cemeteries and researching cemeteries in general and finding out how many cemeteries relocate their bodies to other cemeteries, for whatever reason, a lot of
yeah,
times, with these, because this, if you're 1860s, this is definitely at the beginning of the rural cemetery movement here.
yes,
Well,
exactly.
about the
Yep.
middle of it here in America, but um, the number of especially wealthier families or families whose ancestors were buried in cemeteries that had just like completely fallen apart, and they were like, we want something a little more prestigious and something nicer.
Yes.
So then
Yes.
they would have these whole things that they dig them up and move them out. And yeah, I'm hoping at that point, by the 1860s, especially those that were buried in those 1700s, hopefully there was mostly just bones left, so it wouldn't
Hopefully.
be too gory. But not to
Yeah.
get into all the details of what a decomposed body is like. Although they weren't doing embalming and stuff right until up about then. So, some of those older bodies
Right.
are probably okay
Right.
by then.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were saying you guys went and you did all your research. What were some of the more fascinating stories that you discovered, that you hadn't heard about from your customers at the store?
Well, a lot of the research, some of the research, like I said, I had been hanging on to it for 20 some years. Um, like the Curtis Monument, which is massive.
I'll find it while
it's
you're
just,
chatting.
yes. Oh my goodness. And that one blows my mind because she is literally on like the crest of the hill, and
Yep.
pretty much anywhere you go in the cemetery, you can see her pointing, and she's massive. And like it's so impressive that, to me, so many of these people lived in different places and they traveled the world and they had money, but they still chose Hillside to be buried in. Like, that's amazing to me. But probably my favorite newly discovered person was Launt Thompson, who
Okay.
was the sculptor. who actually wound up spending his last days in the local psychiatric center.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, he didn't have a marked grave. So my friend Cheryl and I, we had coordinates, and we were like, okay, we're gonna hunt his grave down. Like, I'm not quite sure how to do this. So we had an old map, and we were able to say, okay, this is section blah blah blah, this is section, and of course I can't remember the coordinates right at the second, but
Well,
this is section blah blah blah. And then there were some graves nearby that actually had the posts, and they actually had numbers on the post, like
right.
not mailboxes, but like they were actually marking. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like, look at this. So we were like, oh, all right, it's got to be over here someplace. So we were like counting backwards, and there it was, nice and flat. Not, we were looking for an actual grave, but it was actually the flat stone that they had,
Right.
because we were all sat, like, we felt so terrible reading his story. I'm like, you know what? I said, if his grave still isn't marked, I said, we're going to mark it. I said, I don't care if we go to the dollar store and buy a little something. I said, we're going to mark it for this poor guy,
Aw.
and lo and behold, we found the marker, and we had to clean it off a little bit, but we were like, that was like the best discovery. We were both so happy, because we felt like oh my goodness, we found it. Like, we kind of did him justice a little bit by finding it, this poor
Right.
forgotten guy, so, and I mean, his work, oh my goodness, like, it's unbelievable the way he sculpted and everything. It's like, wow. So that was probably my favorite newest discovery, because I hadn't heard about him prior until I started getting ready to do this book. So,
Well, I'm glad he had some kind of mark, even if it wasn't, super elaborate like some of the others or stuff. The fact that
yes, yeah,
he
but
had a
it's
marker and
flat,
we could find it.
Yes, and we did find it, and like I said, it was like party time. We were so excited. We were so
You're
excited.
like,
We
look, you're
found it.
here.
I know, and that's how I knew Cheryl was the perfect person to bring with me, because she was just excited as I was.
I say, I'm trying to hold this up. So there's the Curtis Monument. You can see, like you
Yes,
said, she's pointing straight up.
yes, and
And
he is just massive. I mean, the base of that statue is just, holy smokes, it's
it
huge.
always amazes me. And that was before, modern technology to help put these bases and stuff
Yes,
together. I mean, they
yes,
probably use some sort of a crane and stuff to put it all up eventually, but like that, knowing how heavy this is, these things
I
are,
can't
and they're,
even. Yeah, she was the last one to pass in her family. Her husband, her son, and her daughter. I think her daughter died like 15 days before she did.
geez.
1909, she passed,
Yeah.
and she was interesting. I mean, she had an interesting life, um, but she had Ralph Blakelock paintings, which
Mm.
I so badly want to get one of his paintings to hang in my house, because he was another one. He spent a good part of his life in the local psychiatric center.
Wow.
So, but she had some of his original paintings, and that was the topic of discussion when she passed, because she had left a lot of things to her help, and lawyers and whatnot, and like her
Right.
granddaughters were like contesting the will, and it turned, I guess, into a big thing. I don't know whatever resulted from it. I couldn't find anything beyond that. I'm curious to know what happened to the paintings, of course, but yeah, just interesting. I mean, they used to stay in the Waldorf Astoria, like, they didn't, like, they kind of like,
Hmm.
they were like kind of like wealthy gypsies, her and her daughter, after a while, because she was her daughter's caretaker.
Right.
So,
It,
so I'm like, they had an interesting life, and they still chose Hillside to be buried
well,
in,
I mean, from what I can see in the pictures, it's a gorgeous like area. And my guess is at the time, Hillside was just one of those places that people had visited, in life and said, you know what, this is a perfect place. There's
Yeah,
hills, there's trees. It's
yeah,
just, and
yeah,
then again, the number of monuments in this cemetery that are so unique that you're not going to see. I mean, yes, there's angels and there's obelisks and all the things that we see in all the cemeteries,
right,
but the families really were like, nope, this is what represents us or my
yeah,
personality or whatever. And you're not going to
yes,
find them just anywhere. So I think,
yeah,
and the fact that this is the other thing I did find fascinating. So as you've mentioned, several of the people buried here did spend a significant portion of time in um the the asylum right there, but the
hmm,
fact that so many of them have actually marked graves, because so often when you have, now granted some of them were very wealthy and obviously their families weren't going to let them go unmarked, but
right,
there's so many times where, especially in the late 18 early 1900s, where that was still such a stigma, And there's a lot of times people don't get a marked grave after they pass away. So
Right,
I
right.
love that you were able to find some of those stories and find the graves to correspond with them and say, okay, yes, they had some very tragic things happening in their lives and they had to
Yes.
spend time in this institution, but
Yes.
their family still honored them with these gorgeous markers in their
Yep.
cemetery.
Yep. I know there's the Civil War veteran Henry Dill. He was kind of up in the woods, and for a long
Yeah.
time his grave was lost. And I believe he was another one that spent his last days at the psych center. The place must have a revolving door. I don't know, but his was lost for a long time, and we found it. We found it up in the woods and cleared
Oh,
it off a little bit, and and it's just we were disappointed we couldn't find little Alice who had been murdered in like 1909. She 1902. Either way, she had passed away, and the guy was eventually caught in California. He killed two other people along with her. We really wanted to find her grave just so we can kind of honor her a little bit, but
right.
that might be in the days to come. Eventually, hopefully, we'll stumble upon it. If it's even still visible. I mean, who knows? Like, who knows what happens? Things fall over and then they get covered.
And they
So
also sink. They can, I mean, there's plenty of markers that will sink under the ground. And
yes, yes,
although if you have access to maybe some of the old maps and she's listed on there, there's always the
yes,
chance if it did
yes.
sink, you can like take a stick and poke it in the ground. Sometimes you can find those stones.
Find them. Yes.
Um,
The cemetery records were in transit. They were in. I mean, I guess years ago, and I want to say the 20s, but I'm not positive on that. There was a fire, so a
oh,
lot of cemetery records got destroyed.
yeah.
They're currently, I guess last I knew, they're currently with the caretaker, and they're in the process of being moved elsewhere. And we just weren't able to get our hands on them at that point. So so I said it's fine. We have fun hunting. It's fine.
That's
We were
okay.
just
I was gonna say it might just, make for a second book later on down the road when if
yes.
they can
When we
digitize.
do finally find, yes, yes. And that, oh my goodness, the Dr. Horton, who was killed in 1861 on the train by the
Mm-hmm.
Confederate troops, like that was amazing. We couldn't find him either, and we were so bummed we couldn't find him. But just I'm like, oh my goodness, like these, it's just amazing to me, like how everybody, I don't know, it's people tend to look at cemeteries and think, oh yeah, dead people, but there's so many stories attached to each and every single one. It's just,
Exactly.
they were people once, and I love having faces to the stone. Like I just love hearing about their lives, and
That's exactly where, when I very first started really researching stories, because like
yeah,
you, I would pass a cemetery and be like, I wonder who these people are. And
exactly.
the cemeteries that actually started this podcast, which are the ones here in Central City, Colorado, I would visit all the time. And there was one particular section of graves. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I call it the ladies because it's like five women that are all buried near each other. And after I started doing some research and stuff, I learned they were mostly friends in life. They knew each other. Of course,
Oh,
Central City, smaller community. Well, it was much bigger once upon a time, but it was a gold mining community, right? And it happened because of our gold rush. But I like to go sit by their graves and just talk to them. Like, these were women that were doing not necessarily incredible things. They were just going
right.
about their lives, doing their daily things, but they had moved from other parts of the country and other parts of the world to follow these husbands that are doing this gold mining, living in the Rocky Mountains, it's still not easy today, but definitely then they
Right.
had to learn how to like cook differently and keep their children safe and all these challenges that we
Sure.
totally take for granted in our
Yeah,
modern age. And
absolutely.
yeah, I would sit there, and this is before I knew them, but I was like, just felt like this like kinship with them, knowing that they had stories that
Yes, absolutely.
they're
Yep.
just there. And so, yeah, and people would go by and not even think about who they were and what their feelings were about things and their opinions and how they just
I
lived
know.
their lives. And
I
that's
know.
to me the exciting thing about any cemetery is knowing that there's so many stories that.
I know. I know.
And I'm going to guess because of the style of your book, you were probably limited to word count and stuff, um, which always makes it hard with these books. Every author I talk to, they're like, yeah, there's so many more stories I wanted to share, so much more I wanted to put in, but you
it
only
was
get to
hard
do so
to
many.
narrow it down. Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to narrow it down.
But it's still, you did such a fabulous job putting it together. And I don't know how you narrowed down some of your photos too, because if you're like anybody else that does the photography in cemeteries, you just have so many. But
That was tough. That was tough. And I actually had my hairdresser who grew up in Middletown. I saw her the other day and she was like, I love the book. She says, because I recognized so many names.
Mhm.
And she was like, she goes, but I think anyone who doesn't even know the area would enjoy the book. She says,
Oh
because
yeah.
of the photography and the stories and the this and the that. And I said, well, that's what I wanted to do. I said, I wanted to make it kind of appealing for everybody, and like she enjoyed it, like I said, because she recognized so many names in the book. I mean, the college, the
Uh-huh.
Horton, the Morrisons. I mean, those names are staples in Middletown. Beeks. I mean, even like Janung. I mean, these are all like street names that everybody's familiar with that comes from Middletown. So it's just kind of neat to see to walk through Hillside and be like, oh yeah, that's a street. Oh yeah, that's a street. Oh yeah, I saw that name on a building. Because I mean, there's still old buildings in town. And
Right.
some of them have that painted, type print across the tops of the buildings. And who had this drugstore and who had this building, who had that building. So it's really just interesting every time. And of course, Middletown has changed a lot, since then. But I mean, it was very, very bustling. And even when I was a kid, like my mother would bring me downtown in the
Mhm.
70s. And like we used to shop on North Street, because there were department stores and stuff down there. And then, the mall opened and that was the end of those places, which was a shame, but, all the old timers had their stores and their businesses on North Street there on, in main section of town. And I remember going there when I was a kid and just being in awe of all the old buildings. And, so I think this was kind of I think this was just bound to happen.
Oh yeah.
Thinking back and knowing how I was as a kid and, just, yeah, this was just instilled in me as a young age. And, so.
I love that. I love that. Even as a kid though, I mean, obviously your mom fostered some of the thought and stuff and kept things
Yes.
alive for you that way, but just the
Yes.
fact that it stuck with you as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of kids that wouldn't necessarily notice a cemetery or a town in the way you were noticing it. But you wanted to know. And then my favorite part is your story about working at the grocery store and people telling you
Yeah.
the stories of their ancestors in town. And
Yeah.
when you go to the cemetery, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when Joe told me about this, the fact that you had
Exactly. Yep.
these stories to put to the
Yeah.
gravestones.
And I had faces to,
Yes,
so and so's grandson. Oh, that must have been his grandfather. Like, and he used to come in and buy a newspaper from us. Like,
I
just
love that.
yeah, yeah. And like I said, I mean, it's been, I live out of the area, not too
Right.
far from Middletown, but I don't go to Middletown that much anymore. But yeah, so I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I wonder what happened to all the people I knew from the store. Like, I mean, I know some of them are older and past, unfortunately, but some of them are in Hillside, but I know of a few in Hillside. But yeah, everybody else I kind of, think about too. I wonder, what became of everybody and, but yeah, it was kind of like a tangible thread for me
Right.
to all the local history, so it kind of made it more tangible for me that I actually had people that, you know,
Where,
you
yeah,
know,
you could connect it to and yeah, it
yes,
gives you a connection that you might not have had otherwise. You
well,
could have still
exactly,
been totally interested in the cemetery, but the fact that you had these personal stories that had been shared with you just
exactly.
randomly at the checkout,
Yeah,
like
yeah, and I mean,
it's
not
great.
even, just different. I mean, what the one of the net was he a nephew? He was a nephew of the Morrisons,
Hmm.
that donated the college. He was a good friend of my boss's at the time, and he used to come in all the time. So like I knew, not that he sat and told me stories, but like he'd mention a couple things in
Hmm.
passing. And I was able to tie him to, oh, okay, that was his aunt, and this was this one. When I was doing the research, so it's kind of cool to actually have faces, and you know, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it all ties it together for me. So
I love it. And the fun thing about your book too is, people have probably in passing heard of Middletown. Maybe they have driven through, spent some time there, or maybe not. But the fact that here's a book that is very easy to read through. Obviously, I spent way more time looking at the pictures and would get super distracted, and I'd be like looking at the headstones because you've got some gorgeous ones in here, or the other monuments, and just trying to pick out all the details and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's such a great little book to get those little details about what it was like to be in Middletown, what it, and kind of what it even today, because these, you took your pictures within the last 20-ish years and put it all together. But it gives you an
yeah,
idea of this little place in New York that's not New York City, that's not Buffalo. It's just this little community that came together, and they
yeah.
had their quirks and they had their own dramas and things going on. And
Right.
then this is the final result of it, is this gorgeous cemetery that's up there on these hills. Like I said, I love the fact, this is my favorite thing about East Coast cemeteries, is there's so many trees in most of them, and they've got the hills, and you can just kind of like
Yes.
wander
Yeah.
through them. And again, you took so many of your pictures in the fall, which I love. So you have some the leaves and stuff, although you've got all the seasons. I will say that there are all the seasons there. So if somebody's not a fall fan, there's definitely some spring and winter and summer pictures in here too, but the fall
We
pictures are
actually
my favorite.
went, it was New Year's Eve one year. We had actually went and it was so warm and rainy and foggy and we got
Ooh,
drenched. But I'm like, but this fog is great. This
I
fog is
was
great.
gonna
My friend
say,
Carol, she was such a trooper. She just got soaked along with me. She didn't care, but I'm like, we can't pass up this fog. This is great,
I
So
need
I feel like I did get a lot of different seasons in,
you
I mean,
did.
it was basically, we went back and forth a couple times. I would say like within maybe like a year's time, a little less. There was one day it was a little chillier and that, produced like the bluer skies and the darker clouds. And, so I did want to kind of represent Hillside in all seasons because I mean, it's enjoyable no matter when you go.
Right.
But yeah, I think the fall is definitely my favorite there. It's just with the hills and the trees and the leaves, it just, yeah, like Indian summer, like it
Mm-hmm.
was, it was gorgeous. The sun was shining. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
Absolutely
it's
beautiful.
you did a phenomenal job. Like I said, your
Thank you very much.
photography is beautiful. And of course, that's kind of what, well, we've been following you on your Instagram account for a while too. So you share a lot of other pictures on there, but
Yes. Yep.
like, and that's, I'd been following you, and then I had seen your post about your book, and I was like, oh, we need to have her on so we can talk about her book,
Well, thank
because
you. Yeah,
everybody
I
should know
appreciate
about
it.
it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's it's wild. I keep it on my coffee table and I'm like, wow, that's my book. It's
You're
just
like, I
weird,
did
but I
that.
know. And I'm telling, like the cover, I
Oh,
had to send
yes.
in, I had to send in six different photos, for them to choose, what worked best, on the publishing end, for the
Right.
cover. And when I saw the cover, I said, "Oh my God, this is perfect."
It's
Like down
gorgeous.
to the font, this is perfect.
Yeah.
So they did a really great job in putting it together. And I mean, every step of the way, they made sure this was okay. They made sure that was okay. So I feel like it's a true reflection of what I wanted. So it's just perfect. I'm so happy with the way it came out.
Yeah, it does a phenomenal job of representing your work as a photographer, and all the time and energy you put into doing the research to learn about
Yes.
the different
Yeah.
families and
Yep.
the
Yep.
town. And it just, again, I've never been to Hillside or Middleton, although it makes me want to go. And obviously now I've added yet another cemetery to the bucket list. One day I will get to all these
Yes.
cemeteries we talk about, but it's just a phenomenal book. So easy to pick up.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll link it in the show notes so folks can go and order it, but you definitely want to have this one in your cemetery book collection. Do you have plans to do another book on any other cemeteries?
Um, well, I was thinking about it, but I think the problem with me doing another book on another cemetery, I mean, I would love to do a Hillside Part 2.
Oh, that would be
Um,
fabulous. Yeah,
but the only like I feel like Hillside is a rarity as far as it has everything.
it does. It
It
really
has
does.
everything. It's 40 minutes away from me, so I could shoot down there and take pictures if I needed to. Anything else of that caliber isn't really close enough to me. You know what I mean? Like
Right. It's not
it
as
would
easy
be
to do the research and stuff. Yeah.
exactly. So, and it's just it would be too involved. But you know, and I've just known so much about Hillside for so many years. It was like, it was a given, you know,
I
it was a
love it.
given. That was the one I had to do. Like, there's no question about it, you know? So yeah, so I don't know if it would have to be the right cemetery for me to,
Right.
you know, because like, to me, I love cemeteries, but they're not all that interesting. I mean, this Hillside, not that they're all, how do I say what I mean? Not that they're all not interesting, but I mean, Hillside is just interesting. It's got so much, and there's so many stories, and there's so many different, I mean, the doctor from the psychiatric center is buried in Hillside. Like, sounded like he was an amazing man. Like, and I've seen pictures of him, and he had like this really old, like long white beard. And I'm like, look at him. I'm like, he just looks like the nicest man ever. Like, he's, you know, and he was so groundbreaking in his treatments. Like, he had the creative therapies, he had baseball therapy. He, you know, in a time where they were, you know, basically, you know, doing bad things to, you
Right.
know, psychiatric patients. Like, he was using therapies, and, you know, they had gardens and farm animals, and, you know, he did the right thing by these people,
Yeah, he
you
really
know?
had the philosophy of trying to get them to do things that brought them peace, that weren't
Exactly.
painful, that weren't
Exactly.
derogatory. And then, yeah, and he was like, you know, what the mind needs is rest. And he really did that, which when you think
Yeah.
about it, again, because of when Hillside was started, which was right around the time of the Civil War. So all of that was
Mhm.
coinciding. The number of soldiers that he treated later on in his
Yes.
facility,
Yes.
you know, and we weren't using the terms that we use now for soldiers who've been in combat, but at the time it was definitely some PTSD that some of the men at least were
Right.
suffering from. And
Right.
he was like, let's take you outside and get you some fresh air, and yeah, let's play
Exactly.
a
Play
game.
baseball and do this and do that. And I mean, they even had a newspaper. The patients published a newspaper, and I've actually read
Oh,
a
how
volume of this
fun.
newspaper from 1895. My dad's friend collects a lot of interesting things, and
Uh-huh.
he actually had a published volume of like a year's worth of this
Oh,
newspaper, and it was
cool.
amazing. Like, I read it from like cover to cover. So yeah, and you know that a lot of the patients wrote poetry. So, and I'm a big believer. I mean, if I'm feeling a little, you know, in the dumps, I'll go out
Hmm.
with my camera, and I'm cured. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm a big believer in creative therapies and things like that, you know. So
Yeah,
so
he
Dr.
was definitely
Talcott, like,
innovative.
absolutely, absolutely. And it was a shame from what and I don't remember his exact age when he died, but I think he died very unexpectedly. So,
Mm,
and I know they were all pretty devastated over there when he passed, you know. I think it was like 1902 or something. Like, you know, they were all pretty devastated when he passed over there, you know, because he was such a wonderful, you know, doctor. And, you
mhm.
know,
Yeah,
he
he cared
treated.
about his patients. He didn't
Yes,
um
absolutely. Absolutely.
he wasn't in it to make money, and he wasn't in it to make a name for himself like some doctors
Yes.
at the time, where he really
Right.
did, he
Right.
genuinely wanted to help these people in the way that
Yes.
in whatever ways that he could. But he, like you said, he was very innovative in the way his approach to treating
Yes. Yeah.
psychiatric disorders at the time.
And
um
also, I thought it was interesting too, like, a lot of the doctors, they went to like a homeopathic, you
mhm,
know, a lot of them believed in the homeopathic, because that's the psychiatric center, that's how that place originally started out, was like homeopathic, you know. So even like one of the Civil War doctors, he,
mhm.
you know, started out that way too. And I'm like, wow, like, this is kind of neat, you know. And then of course you have Dr. McMunn, who technically isn't in Hillside because he got moved. He was buried there for 20 years, and then he got moved somewhere else, and I don't know why. But yeah, he was selling the opium elixir, you know. And then, oh, lo and
Right.
behold, people were dying. Oh, gee, I wonder why, you know. But
Well,
you know,
maybe that's why they moved him. No. Maybe
maybe, who knows? Yeah,
they were like, we
but
don't want this
I know.
association anymore.
No, I know, but even like, I would love to have like an old bottle of his. I found them on eBay, believe it or not. McMunn's elixir of
Oh,
opium.
fun.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, I would love to get one of his bottles, and I'd look into it, and then I'd forget, then I'd look into it again, and it was sold out, and I'm like, one of these days I'm going to order one of his bottles just to have it, just because there's a tangible connection. So,
Uh-huh. And that's the
but
one you can put next to the book on the coffee table and be like, okay, I've got the
exactly,
two things.
exactly, yep, exactly, but
Well, I'm so glad that in this case, your thoughts and your ideas from being a little kid on the school bus passing the cemetery to all these years later has led to a book
yeah,
about this particular cemetery that's so special to you that you really did have connections to, and there was something that just said, you know what, you're going to publish about this. So I'm
Yes.
glad that you were able to find a publisher and put this all together,
Me
and
too. Me too.
that
Thank you.
now those of us that don't live in New York can still visit through the book. And again, folks, I'll link it in the show notes for you. But JoEllen, thank you so much for taking some time out this morning to chat with
Oh,
me
thank you so much for having me. What an
and
honor.
share the
Like, I'm
book.
just,
So
yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
so Hillside Cemetery, Middletown, New York, JoEllen Hundeland. I will, again, show notes. We have the link to the book. So definitely go check it out. It's a
Okay.
beautiful, beautiful book to add to your cemetery book collection.
Thank you so much. I
Oh, you're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Thank you.
We thank you for taking time to join us today for this ordinary, extraordinary chat. To learn more about today's discussion, please visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you will find additional links in our show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, The Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery Podcast. This really helps makes us more visible to others on YouTube who may also enjoy our podcast.
And please don't forget to visit us on social media, where we share all kinds of cemetery photos, quotes, tidbits, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, and on X at OrdExtraCem. So OrdExtraCem. If you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple's podcast, Spotify, or directly on our website. You can also leave those same comments on YouTube. Your positive reviews and enthusiasm for our show help others who love cemeteries and history to discover us and all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories. And if you're feeling extra generous and want to help support the podcast in a financial way, you can now buy Dianne and I a cup of coffee, either through YouTube or on our website. Simply click on the coffee cup icon and it will allow you to make a donation.
Until we meet again.